Salutaters, my potats. Welcome to Read with Rave, a series where I read books and stories written by myself or friends of mine. Each episode will be a separate chapter or story. For the record, I have made sure to get the permission from the authors of each book or story so as to avoid copyright infringement. If you are interested in learning more about the author, their social medias will be listed in the description alongside a link to where you can buy yourself a copy of the book. The reason I wanted to start this series is because I enjoy reading, and I wanted to do something that would be calming. This series may also be helpful for people who want to read but do not have the time, or for those who may have struggles reading on their own. So sit back, grab a blanket and a warm beverage, and snuggle up with your pet or a favorite plushie, whatever works for you to help you relax. Today, I will be reading The Crossroads Planet, Book 1 of the Crossroads series, by Robert Field. Before I begin reading, I would like to just put out a disclaimer that this book is not meant for children and is aimed more for a teenage or young adult audience. Part 1. Chapter 1. "Oh, Chris, what have you gotten yourself into this time?" the girl sighed to herself, staring at the floor of the room at the inn. "Run away from your parents, almost broke, and why this planet of all places?" The Dead Horse was a good ways from Galactic Center. Even so, being the only facility in the neighborhood, its fees were rather exorbitant. Crystal began to wish that she were out of this world herself, but her parents had a tight schedule to adhere to. They were well out of the system by this time, to return no sooner than 6 months hence. If that weren't enough, the feelings of foreboding were increasing. Or was it foreboding? It was certainly an eerie feeling. It had begun on the caravan shortly after her rather hasty departure from landing, while she watched her parents' craft disappearing into the stratosphere. It didn't conform to any normal ailment she could recall. She'd been to this planet once before while with her parents on their mercantile adventures through space. She'd decided it was a harmless enough place to take her leave of her parents. "Damn it! It's time I had some adventure of my own," she'd said to herself some light years back while she was planning her escape. She certainly hadn't foreseen that this might not have been the ideal planet for a 6-month jaunt. She turned to look at herself in the mirror. Bright golden wavy tresses fell to shoulder length. She had a heart-shaped face that had broken a few hearts already, and brought her admiring looks wherever she went. She was used to that, and only paid passing attention. Her cornflower blue eyes glanced meditatively back at her. She pushed a stray lock back in place. Freshly bathed, her light-colored body hair stood to its downy fullest, reminiscent of a short-haired cat. She had carefully helped herself to her parents' wares, but there was only so much that she could sneak off ship and carry around with her. Furthermore, some of the technological devices among her baggage were, if not outright prescribed, certainly frowned upon. She might be better off trying to sell them at a discount on the local black market rather than trying to use them openly, then depart quickly into the back country before too many questions could be asked. She had only been able to make a minor selection from her shipboard wardrobe. Her tastes ran to thin cotton dresses in the controlled ship's climate, and she knew the climate of this planet did have a severe streak in it from time to time, so she had only packed a couple, hopefully sturdy enough, but still expressing her femininity. For the rest, she had taken what she hoped was practical but still passively pretty. Her heavy cloak, deep blue and full length, was sensible and had a certain charm as well. Still, she had a perennial low opinion of herself, boys' reactions notwithstanding. They seemed more interested in her looks than anything else. Her looks were certainly adequate for her, but looks weren't everything. She took some pains to improve them, but only occasionally, owing to a certain tomboy streak. It was the promise of the backcountry, among other things, that was part of the allure of this planet. The thought of a trek through the hills intrigued her, if only to counteract the claustrophobia encountered shipboard. She had inquired of the innkeeper about guides, and he had promised to locate a suitable one for a fee, although he said that what with the problems currently facing the planetary government, and the consequent civil unrest in several provinces, it might not be that advisable to travel great distances. Meanwhile, the strange feelings continued to grow, feeling almost like the prelude to sickness. She decided that maybe the thing to do was to get out of the inn and get some fresh air. It wouldn't do to depart into the hills without a guide, so she'd get out and see the town. Some local festivity was taking place tonight, part of a series of such events, which occurred several times during the year. This particular occasion was a high feast time being observed by a local cult who professed knowledge of certain arcane arts. Preparations were already being made on the town square, tents being raised and a bonfire prepared. She put on a knee-length cotton dress and her cloak, then went out early. Pausing for a moment beneath the weather-beaten sign prominently displaying an obviously expired equine, she proceeded onto the square, there to mingle with the gathering throng, all gaily decked out in their festive garb. Almost all of the attendees seemed to be playing some part or other in the proceedings. The sun was beginning to set. Torches were lit, some for illumination and some for igniting the fire. Abruptly, the last of the sun disappeared out of sight, but the bonfire wasn't lit just yet. Instead, the flickering torchlight shone on a gathering crowd of both young and old. The old folks sat on benches at the edges, while the younger folk, singly and in pairs, roamed here and there. The elders were in celebratory, but staid, outfits, while the young folk were dressed in a garb that was decidedly suggestive. To her amusement, she found herself turning a few heads as well. The lecherous looks from some of the young men were embarrassing, true enough, but also vaguely pleasing. After a brief initial stare, the general public paid little further attention, save for one gentleman who stared a bit longer, to her growing dismay. He wore an eye-catching outfit with a golden-hued cape. She tried to put people between them, but a short while later, passing in front of some booths, she saw him peering out from the shadows between them. A minor curiosity within herself, she stared back, intrigued, until a group of passing youths gave her an opportunity to absent herself. Some little ways from the unlit bonfire, a portion of the lawn was being cleared, and musicians were setting up on a low stage. Dancing and singing soon followed. Drawn by the lively tunes, she edged closer to the action. Suddenly, a rather boorish-looking young gentleman, who seemed to have had quite enough to drink already, appeared seemingly from nowhere and approached her. His body language made her uncomfortable immediately. With a half-empty wineskin in one hand, he staggered up to her, preceded by his breath, and brusquely accosted her, after delivering himself of a loud belch. "Wouldst thou like to drink, wench?" he stammered as he thrust the skin in her face. Crystal cringed and took a half-step back, only to fetch up against the side of a tent. She was trapped. What do I do with a drunken reveler so early in the evening? Warily, she cast a glance about her, but no avenue of escape presented itself. Lance stumbled into his rooms, fresh from his master's studio. He was still smarting from the rebukes he had gotten for the rotten performance of his lessons today. Perhaps the feasting was too much on his mind. He dropped into a chair, allowing himself to wallow in his accumulated woes. Go make an ass of himself yet again? He usually either found himself in a tawdry affair with some undeserving girl, or the butt of some prank. Yet something kept drawing him to the feastings. Possibly it was the hope that a truly original vision of feminine beauty would assault his senses and declare herself his. Nay, that's but a pipe dream, he reminded himself. If only he had the patience or the confidence to truly excel in his studies, and not just be a third-rate assistant. He put his books away carefully and went to the college dining hall. He took his seat silently while food was served up. Students ate in silence according to a long-standing custom, while a guest speaker lectured, for the current Dean's Council held that mealtimes could best be spent in acquiring general knowledge. Tonight's topic was full of platitudes and moral values about courage, valor, and fortitude, rather nebulous, in fact. Examples of heroism and duty, dry as the hills, probably culled from some exotic off-planet research. This planet had no need of heroism, just survival. Mealtime over, he arose with the other students to quit the hall, when a proctor drew him aside and reminded him of an appointment. Then he remembered. He would have to stop by and see the dean tonight before going to the feasting. A rather cryptic message had been delivered to him, basically commanding his presence to briefly keep an appointment. What now? He thought. Some past infraction just come to light? Sullenly, he proceeded to the dean's office and stood, trying to at least be respectful. The dean stepped forward from his private chamber. Lance tensed, expecting the worst. Sit down, please. This isn't a disciplinary session. I merely have some questions for thee, and also some information. I have been in communication with thy adviser. Frankly, he is of the opinion that thee should be suspended from the College of Magic since thee is not suitable for training in the art, and wished me to communicate this message to thee. Again, frankly, there are others on the faculty that would see thee expelled for thy behavior alone. Thee is no doubt aware that these are difficult times, even for the planet that has grown rather accustomed to difficulty. I'm sure thee is. One can't spend one's mealtimes being lectured on the current events, among other topics, and not be. An evil force has arisen, one which gravely misuses the spirit winds. Few exist on this planet that may be of any effect against this force, save within these walls. A few of the masters have decided to go on joint sabbatical to study how to best combat this force. This puts the college in somewhat confused circumstances. All students are affected by this change. It's a damn good thing it's right after finals. The dean rose from his seat and began to pace up and down in the room. This room was like most masters' rooms, rather bare, with a desk, large chair and small chair, slate, and small bookcase. The office of the dean was filled from the ranks of the masters. The dean taught fewer classes in consequence. Thy master is one of those joining this consortium. His classes will be suspended forthwith. How ironic that on a planet that has known many an adversity but never war, we are forced to operate on a wartime footing. Tell me, boy, how well did thee fare with thy master? Lance opened his mouth, which had gotten rather dry. We did not see eye to eye for the most part. I just cannot seem to concentrate on my lessons. I keep thinking that it must be due to some failure on my part. I know my record isn't all that good. Is it past sins that have kept me from advancing as others would have hoped? The dean's expression modified somewhat. Thy master is ranked among the best that this college has to offer, largely on the basis of his exceptionally personal skill, which he is offering in the service of the planetary forces now being raised to combat the source of the evil. He is a good teacher for those with a skill requiring no coaxing, shall we say? I think perhaps thee has been assigned to the wrong master to effectively develop thy skill. Thee does seem to need the occasional reminder to keep in line, but I do not think that thy past infractions are serious enough to merit continued censure. Classes are starting in the next several days, and meanwhile we have to get matters within our walls sorted out. When the new terms begin, thee will have a new master, one who, while her skills may be atrophied beyond recall, nevertheless is possessed of a keen mind and the ability to sense the magical activities of others even while she is unable to practice them. I have spoken with the master in question, and she is quite ready to accept thee into our classes and perhaps devote some time for personal instruction. She seems to have a rather high opinion of thee, which, granted, is at odds with the other masters. However, as some of the more advanced students will be accompanying their masters, this gives thee a unique opportunity to be assigned to the one master who may yet make something of thee. Thee should know that thee is extremely lucky to have a new sponsor arisen at this time. Otherwise, thee would have to pursue a different major on the main university campus. At last the dean smiled. So, young lad, thee is blessed by the very adversity which afflicts others. What says thee now? I just hope I can curry some greater favor now. Perchance I can know who this master is to be? Nay, lad, that be against the rules. Thee'll be finding out in the usual way. The notice be posted day after the morrow. Thee is dismissed. Lance exited decorously from the dean's chambers, and once a little ways down the hall, relaxed the stern composure he had been maintaining. His spirits restored, he returned to his rooms to prepare for the evening's feasting, part of the fall holidays. Something told him that this evening would be different somehow. Something inside him told him so. He was sure he had true talent. The new master seemed to think so. Yet he was coming to believe that further progress was hopeless. Well, never mind. A short holiday, a new master, things would at least be different. So he put on a happier face, left his troubles behind for the evening, and really set out to enjoy himself. Lance set out of his lodgings in high spirit. He didn't have any specific plans, but with his looks and charm, surely some girl would come along and basically make his plans for him. Lance, old devil, go get him, he laughed to himself. Thrusting his golden-hued cloak back behind him and setting his cap at the jaunty angle, he strode off to the harvest feasting. Cindy was waiting for him like she so often did, wearing her man-stalker outfit as she referred to it, flashing her pretty legs, swirling her cape, and generally prancing and posturing to secure his attention. He ogled her the way he always did, but tonight something in her behavior put him off, and he decided that he didn't really want to spend an evening on the receiving end of all of her flirting, ending most likely in his place or hers. So he put her off with one of the excuses that were becoming more and more common, and made good his escape. There was a certain something about him that had the average bubble-headed wench all but dragging him off into a corner. He had had his share of these encounters, but in the long run found them little more than a harmless diversion. Someday I'll find a girl who really has something besides good looks, he thought. Meanwhile, the thought trailed off. He knew most of the local girls, and none of them really measured up. He was in training to develop what was turning out to be a major skill with the spirit winds, enough to get him a job perhaps as a healer's assistant. Already he could sense things about people. Perhaps that was why the local girls seemed, well, so shallow. Lately, though, it seemed to be getting harder to practice his skill, unlikely as that seemed. He strode onto the square and looked around. Much the normal crowd tonight for the most part. The old fogies watched from the sides, and the young things milled about and got drunk. He recognized not a few of his past bedmates, paired off with upstart young lads, when he noticed that a number of heads were turning. Following their gaze, he saw a comely young girl in a cloak that appeared almost purple in the fading light, open at the front, but with the hood up. She was gazing uncertainly about her. Gradually, the crowd's attention returned to previous distractions, but his attention remained focused. Something about her would not let him be distracted. He would not, he decided, rush up like a boar and thrust himself upon her, though his mind was brimming with questions and the impulse to do exactly that. Rather, he faded into the shadows of one of the stalls and continued his study of her as she wandered aimlessly about. He caught her eye for a few seconds as she passed by his vantage point, and noticed a jumble of emotions in her expression. But just then a group of people came between them, and when they moved on, she was gone. Some kind of feeling had stirred within him at the sight of her, but his thoughts kept him too preoccupied to make much of it. As the musicians were setting up, he moved on to where the dancing was about to start. Out of the shadows stepped a young man that she had spied earlier, giving her appreciative glances that weren't quite as lewd as some. He shouldered the drunken sot aside. "At last I find thee. I recall thee promised me a dance." "Well?" And he turned to stand squarely before her. The lout staggered off, disappointed. As soon as the other man had gone, she turned to the newcomer, her face a mixture of relief and trepidation. The hood of her cloak was up, pleasantly framing her face with her hair that looked honey-colored in the current light. She hoped that her expressions would be shadowed by the hood, but his stare indicated otherwise. "I believe thee owes me a dance, if only for getting thee out of that scrape," he said, with mischief showing in his eyes. He extended an arm for her to take. She blushed fetchingly. The slender bare arm she extended from beneath her cloak to accept his grasped his hand with an unexpected firmness. Her fingers seemed to tingle as their hands touched, rather like a mild electric shock. She was not familiar with the dances she danced, but he led well, and the strong beat made it easy to keep time. She was full of questions, yet her upbringing had taught her some etiquette, particularly not to chatter inanely during a dance. She was relieved when he led the way out of the dancing area and to a somewhat secluded bench partly in shadow. He turned to her and wordlessly fixed her with his eyes. She wished she could put up her hood and draw back into its depths. Instead, she gazed back, She suddenly got a dizzy feeling, and he put an arm around her shoulder to steady her. The dizziness was replaced by a curiously delicious sensation. She opened her mouth, but nothing except air came out. At last he dropped his eyes and assumed a somewhat sheepish expression. "Well, partner, thee intrigues me," he somewhat haltingly uttered. "I am one Lance, apprentice healer. And thee?" Crystal found a small voice. "I am Crystal, merchant's daughter." "Ah, I thought thee a traveler, perchance from off-planet?" She smiled. "Perchance I am. You are not like the others yourself. You do not drink and carouse and make a bloody nuisance of yourself like that other fellow did. You act like any healthy male. In short, you are a gentleman." Her face reddened more. "Why should you only be an apprentice healer, Now it was his turn to blush. Well, I just can't concentrate on the healing arts to the satisfaction of my master." He paused. "But he does like my bedside manner," he finished gamely. "Isn't concentration something that can be worked on?" she asked, wondering just how naive she might be sounding. "I have tried on numerous occasions, but the master has decided that I will not progress past assistant, and so has refused me further teaching in the advanced portion of the art. I had so hoped to be fully qualified healer, if not one of the more noted ones. Now, there's something about thee." He stared thoughtfully at her, and then through her. "Thy aura is a bright one," he said at last. "Surely thee must have some talent." Nonplussed, she fumbled for a response when suddenly the world whirled around her head and then vanished. She woke up lying down and sat up unsteadily. Lance was nowhere to be seen. The music had stopped and the dancing was over. The crowd was quite thick now, and the atmosphere was nearly stifling, contrary to her expectations of the fresh night air. The torches were set to the wood, and the flames sprang up from the pitchy wood. Local weather conditions kept the smoke from straying too far. The smoke combined with the incense burned in braziers here and there. All in all, she found herself breathing a rather repellent mixture, not at all helping own internal state. She went to a booth to purchase a cup of cider, only to find it rather more alcoholic than she would have preferred. Nonetheless, it was wet, and she was thirsty, so she drank it. As the evening progressed, she found herself becoming increasingly dizzy, and at long last decided to retire to her room at the inn. Traversing the square, which had now become a maze of pavilions, booths, and milling participants, she spied a gap between two tents and made for it. A tent rope found her shin, and the ground came up to meet her. For a second time, consciousness faded, and for a while swirling darkness was all she knew. She awoke to discover that she was seated in the back of a booth, with anxious faces peering at her while discussing her state. "I tell thee, and there's no denying it, she looks mighty unwell this even, as no one who comes to our affairs should have a right to," the female figure was saying. "Our art's to heal, not to sicken, unless she be put off by the spirits summoned hither tonight. Ah, be that an eye-opening there? Welcome back, dearie. Took a bad step, did thee?" I'm not sure," Crystal whispered, trying to get her voice working. "Should have been watching where I was going." "Thee had no call to be reeling about as thee was. I have been seeing thee here and there this even, and thee looks like the typical drunken reveler to me. Be thee spirit-minded?" "I don't know, ma'am," Chris croaked. "I have only been down in the valley a few days. I've just come from off-planet." "Well, if thee be new in town, might trouble to learn some of the ways around here." The man spoke for the first time. "Not that we don't like strangers, but best to know what thee's in for. What Mart means is, does thee have a ken for the spirit forces that circle this planet, flow down the valley like the wind, and swirl about the town what are crossroads in more ways but one?" The thick accent puzzled Crystal as she sought to comprehend the questions. "Spirit forces? I mean, I've heard of the strong local superstitions here, but that's only one of the endearing qualities which attracted me here. It be no superstition. The spirit winds blow hard or soft, but never stop. Them without the ken pay them no mind, but them as do feel it. Newcomers have it worst if they do. Needs thee'll get some help in understanding it. I'm no witch woman, but there's one here tonight can help you. Can thee stand now? I think so, Crystal replied, willing her leg muscles to work. Leaning on the woman's arm, she rose unsteadily to her feet. It's not but 2 tents over. They'll make it. Off we go now. And Mart led Crystal out of the tent. They stopped at a particularly nondescript booth and entered via flap at the side. Oh, Amber, has thee a moment? I've a girl that needs thy ministrations. She be new here, likely have the ken and don't know it. The woman named Amber turned about on her high stool, revealing a rather youngish face. Another stranger from off-planet. They never understand, do they? They come here expecting high adventure, but when it hits them, it's not what they expected. Is it ever? Still. She broke off, stood up, and picked up a stone from her table. Come close, child, and let me check thy aura. She turned the stone this way and that, moving it up and down as she motioned for Crystal to turn about. Sit down, child. Bide a while I confer with Marte. And with that, Amber and Marte withdrew beyond a further partition in the tent. Some moments later they returned with grim expressions. I can't put this any better. Can thee leave our planet? Thee must, and thee wishes to be well again, else thee'll need proper teaching, Amber expressed thoughtfully. Well, I've run away from my parents, and they're light years away by now, so no, I can't. But that's the way I wanted it. What's this about needing to be taught? Well, my stone has never quivered so. I am the best judge of souls in this part, yet I wouldn't dare go beyond the most basic instruction with thee. What is thy name, child? Crystal. Well, Crystal, thee's in a pickle, and no mistake. Thee's got something in thee what's beyond my ken. I can teach thee a few basics, but beyond that, thee'll need my old teacher. She be hard to find these days. Gone right up into the Badlands, she has. Wants no traffic with everyday traders, she does. Take a few days to see if anyone has got word of her. Staying at the inn, is thee? Yes, Amber. That's Mistress Amber to thee. Watch thy step in the inn. Mighty unsavory types there. I have a shop 2 streets back of the square. Mind thee look me up in a day or 3. With that, she promptly sat down on her stool and put her back to Marte and Crystal. Marte held up the flap for Crystal. That is Mistress Amber for thee. If she can't teach thee, then no one in this town be able to. She says thee have a great talent, maybe full equal to her own. Then again, maybe greater. Amber I trust to know as she be sayin'. This teacher of hers used to live in the hills above the town, but said it was gettin' too busy like for her tastes, and went further into the back country. Some will know, and Amber will locate her, but 'twill take some time. Do mind thy own business in the inn, as some roughnecks will make it thee their business. As Marte spoke, she carefully led Crystal across the street and into the lobby of the inn. My booth be on the square every market. Do stop in if thee needs aught. Thank you, Marte. Thank you for your help. I'm so confused now. I think I'll go to bed and see about things in the morning. Thank you for joining today's episode of Read with Rave. If you liked, like the video, comment down below if you want to hear more, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And as always, I'll catch you on the next wave. Bye guys!